Welcome to Healing Childhood Trauma, the podcast for millennial women who are ready to heal from the past. Here, we have the deeper discussions on emotional well-being and practical tips that will empower you to transform your relationships and underlying anxiety from insecure to secure attachment. I'm Lysandra, your host and psychotherapist. I'm a little bit obsessed with human development, deep conversations, and finding the lesson even in the most challenging of circumstances. I'm very happy to have you with me on this journey of self-discovery where we unpack the past and heal in the present. Okay, so today I have a very special guest on the podcast, and it's someone that I've known for a while, and I'm very excited to have her on today. So Claire, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, thanks for having me. So I'm Dr. Claire Plumbly. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm also an author now on a book called Burnout, How to Manage Your Nervous System Before It Manages You. And I also run an associate psychology practice both in Taunton, Somerset, where I live, and online. So we are a small group of psychologists and psychological therapists who are trauma trained and bring that lens and offerings to burnout, trauma, and anxiety, self-esteem, those types of issues.
Yeah.
And we've also overlapped in the past, haven't we? Because one of our specialist offerings is EMDR intensives. And so if someone feels like they're like not making movements in the right direction, feel a bit stuck or plateaued with their other talking therapy, sometimes they can come and have an EMDR intensive with us, and that can get things dislodged a bit, and they can kind of use those learnings and process memories to go back to integrate into their other therapy.
Yeah, and I found that really useful for clients that I've worked with as well, just for them to, because I tend to get a lot of people who are very self-aware and very intellectualizing, and sometimes that can kind of get in the way of being able to process trauma or to get past maybe some stuck memories or things from the past. And it's having the intensive and then coming back to talk therapy has really shifted things, almost like almost accelerated the process of therapy in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we've worked, haven't we? You kindly referred before for that kind of work. I think that where you described it is really good, actually, because it's actually very much about body processing and moving through as well. And like you say, if people are very cognitive about it. But just to say, it can also be a standalone option for people. You don't need to have it as an option if you're already in therapy and getting stuck. Sometimes people can come, we work on a single event trauma and they feel better. And it's just a really lovely way of working. Sorry, I've gone off down one niche area very quickly.
But that's kind of what this episode is going to be about. So although we're going to be talking today about burnout, how that shows up in relationships, parenting, and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, I think people who are listening are going to have a bit more of an insight, because it's just going to be more of a conversation as opposed to me interviewing you and asking questions. And because we know each other, it's almost like you're getting to earwig in on a therapist and a clinical psychologist, just having a chat about all therapist stuff. So I hope that is of interest to you. But yeah, that's essentially what we're going to be doing in the episode today.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So yeah, tell me a bit about the work that you do about burnout. In fact, I was just listening to some of your audiobook on burnout before this, just so I can kind of get a sense of I've listened to it before, but I just wanted to a refresher almost.
Yeah. So there are other books available on burnout, but the reason I wanted to write my book was because it didn't feel like there was another book out there that took the trauma training lens that I have as a background. And so I wanted to take the approach of what we call psychoeducation, so helping people understand how your brain, your body, your nervous system are all being impacted on by your external situation. Helping people understand the difference between external and internal pressures. External pressures being the ones that are quite obvious to see, those incoming stressors, like the juggle of parenting, like caring for elderly parents, projects at work, traffic jams, like all of that stuff that kind of is constantly pummeling us, but also the impact of the internal pressures, which are the pressures we put on ourselves, and they can have roots in very early life, which I know anyone listening to this will be well aware of because of your wonderful work. So, for example, perfectionism, people
Mm,
pleasing, or using busyness to avoid intense emotions,
yeah.
experiential avoidance, that's called. So, yeah, so my book basically kind of helped tease those things apart so people can kind of see, okay, where is all of this coming from and how are those all intersecting?
Mm,
And then a pathway out
yeah.
using the approach that I used in the book was compassionate mind therapy,
Mm,
which I walk people into. And so I do cover the stuff that you often see talked about on social media in those brief posts about boundaries or,
yeah.
switching off after work and things. But I do that towards the end of the book because I don't think people can do those things consistently until they know why they struggle with it, because
Yeah.
it's very well saying we just don't say yes to things, but actually
Mm,
that can feel really difficult in the body to start changing how you do things. So I walk people into all the stuff they need in order to finally achieve those things and
yeah.
explain why they've not been able to do them until now.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's also like the psychoeducation piece first and being able to understand like where the root of that comes from.
Yes.
And I really like how you've also framed like a trauma informed perspective as well, because I don't think people necessarily link those two, like with boundaries, they don't think that
Yeah.
has anything to do with nervous system work.
Yeah.
And quite often you have to make that link of what's happening in your body because your body is going to react like a threat. And because it feels like a threat, that is what almost turns you off from being able to set those boundaries or being able to prioritize yourself or recognize when it's time to say no to
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
even to say yes to things. It's not even just about
Yeah.
saying no.
It just feels physically dangerous for some people.
It
And
does,
like I
yeah.
will be ostracized, I'll be abandoned. And that
Mhm.
level of fear just means you fall into your default patterns of doing, how you've always done things. But
Yeah.
obviously that's not working somewhere down the line and it's burning you out. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so what's the typical type of person that you see coming to therapy or coming to see someone like you, who are like, what's the typical signs that they tend to show? What does burnout look like?
So obviously it does look a little different for different people, but and you can
Mm,
get different levels of burnout. But in functional burnout, which is where people are still working in some form, they're
yeah.
kind of usually noticing some changes that they don't like, and they'll fall into four areas. So the first one is cognitive changes. So that's the things like brain fog,
Mm,
or forgetfulness, difficulty concentrating, as well as a kind of negative kind of thoughts about yourself being hopeless or like a useless therapist or I can't do it, like
yeah.
self-esteem thoughts, and becoming quite cynical. That's a big part of burnouts, that like about the world, about the job, like it's that hopelessness. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of cognitive area. And
Okay.
then emotions.
Mm,
So we one of the definition talks about physical and emotional exhaustion. So I think that sounds a bit confusing. What's emotional exhaustion? How can you get exhausted with emotions? But the way I conceptualize it is, if you think about the full, beautiful repertoire of emotions that humans are capable of,
yeah.
from feeling joy and passion and excitement to kind of feeling just gentle and content, those ones usually have disappeared for a long time out of someone's life, and they're just left with a very narrow bandwidth of either overwhelmed, irritable, snappy,
Mm,
anxious, or low and feeling like flat and hopeless, but they're not getting those like other ones.
yeah.
So that's the second kind of category. The third category is the body.
Mm,
So, like we've talked about like exhaustion, so that's quite heavy in the body. It tends to feel like even just resting is hard. So getting deep replenishing rest is hard, but also it doesn't tend to replenish you after you have done it. But there are other signs in the body which are related to the been in the stress response for too long. So maybe you're struggling to overcome any illnesses, any colds. Maybe your stress related signs like eczema, IBS are flaring up,
yeah.
migraines, like
Mm,
aches and pains in your back and neck. Those are your body kind of whispering to you, like, slow down, do something different. And quite often, a lot of people don't notice them until your body's yelling.
yeah.
So, whatever your signs are, like, what are yours?
When you were going through them, I was like, oh crap.
Tick,
I was
tick,
like,
tick.
yeah, I can definitely relate to that. So like the tension stuff, Migraines will come up. Sometimes something that I notice in myself, and I also hear a lot in my clients as well, is almost like if you sleep, it doesn't matter how much sleep you get, you never quite
Mm,
feel rested.
yeah,
I hear that a
exactly. Yeah, it's
lot.
that like tired but wired, and I get a lot of cold sores. So I always like it was very visual as well,
Yeah.
and painful. Yeah, so that's the body area. Be interesting to hear what your ones are of this is behaviors. And quite
Mm.
often people are doing things that will the behaviors are ways of coping with those other three areas being rubbish. So typically people might start to drink an extra bottle of beer or glass of wine or two or three at night to try and switch their
Mm.
brain off from being
Yeah.
busy, help them wind down. Or, you're reaching for lots of kind of convenience foods and things that, that's obviously okay every so often, but if you're always doing it, it's
Yeah.
really, really difficult.
Mm.
And I forgot to cover this in the first one, cognitions, but decision fatigue is a big part of that. So making
Mm.
decisions that are healthy and aligned with your longer term values is tricky. And that often affects eating. What other behaviors like doom scrolling? It's just a kind of anything that's a quick dopamine hit because your
Yeah.
your body's craving something that's going to lift it out, and so we'll often default to the quick hits. So doom scrolling, like suddenly your Amazon basket is filling up and you're spending way more than you intended, because you're internet shopping. Like it's those things.
Yeah. It's
So
a lot of things that really take you out of your body,
yes,
and it's like
yeah,
trying to numb, trying to
yeah,
forget.
exactly. About coping the moment. And so for me, when I was in functional burnout a couple of years ago, I realized I was buying a lot of internet courses that I didn't really ever I maybe kind of there was a reason why I bought it, but I never
Yeah.
watched any of them, and I kept
Yeah.
the internet algorithm had found me and said, "Oh, yeah, no, she's buying these," and I kept
She's a
buying them.
buyer.
And yeah, I was a buy, and it wasn't like anything tangible that I could come home, put on, and try and like return when I realized and came out of my fug. It was like, oh, I just got tons of courses now and a pressure to watch them all pre-recorded ones.
Mm.
So I'm curious what your behaviors are, if you can own up to them.
Absolutely. I can own up to probably doom scrolling quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I can get lost in the algorithm of my For You page, showing me like funny videos or like things on kittens. I'll watch things on cats all day.
Mine's guinea pigs. My
All right.
my For You page is full of guinea pigs because we've got three guinea pigs.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
like, yeah, cat videos, funny videos, anything that kind of takes me out of trauma. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because obviously trauma work is very like it's heavy.
Yeah.
So if I notice that I'm doing a lot of scrolling or I'm trying to numb out or just dissociate almost, that's a bit of a warning sign for me to,
Yeah.
okay, put down the phone, be a bit more aware and be a bit more conscious of what I'm consuming and why I'm
Yeah.
consuming it.
Yeah. Um, did I imagine you asked me this, or did you ask me to relate this to also relationships?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay, because I was thinking I didn't really start to address that bit. I mean, all of that will impact on your relationships, but I
Mm.
do tend to find that that's all of those signs are your stress response signs from being in chronic stress for too long. Yeah.
Mm.
And we tend to then go inwards, don't we? And we tend
Yeah.
to give off vibes of, I mean, if you're irritable and snappy or low, that's not a kind of come and hug me kind of
Yeah.
vibe. And so certainly in my own relationship, I can speak from personal experience. Like when one of us is in those places, it can feel like the anger it's like anger directed at us
Mm.
personally. Like so we've had to have conversations when we're both calm to go, actually, no, that's not what's happening. I'm just really stressed and struggling.
Mm.
And I really need a hug at a moment
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. And I like how you've also framed that as when we're both feeling calm, that we have
Yes.
that conversation. Because
Mm.
sometimes, especially if you're in burnout or you're irritable, you can have that conversation maybe at the worst possible time.
Yes.
And
And then
so
it's
there,
defensive or it's not
exactly.
heard in the way that you intend. It's hard to be
Yeah.
eloquent with your words, isn't it?
Mm. And I imagine a lot of attachment patterns come up because there's a lot of stories that we then tell about ourselves and about the relationship if we're not quite getting our needs met or it's not how you're showing up and how you're expressing yourself isn't being heard in the way that you intended. It's being heard under a different lens. That can be
Absolutely.
really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. And I think when you're trying to heal from attachment wounds, being really intentional around your decisions with your, with your partner when you're stressed. It's
Mm.
really hard, but it's good to know that old default patterns will rear their heads. And so if
Yeah.
you are someone who is avoidant, you'll start become hyper independent. That will be your
Mm.
default pattern, which will mean that, if your partner is saying, but I can pick the kids up, or I don't mind doing dinner, no, I'm fine, I've got it, like all of that starts to kick in,
Yeah.
because you almost see it as a threat to lean in to that support. You don't see it in that way. It feels like oh, I'm doing this because you can't do it,
Yeah.
attack, which it might
Yeah.
not be intended as.
Mm. And that's definitely a pattern I see when people have more avoidant traits as well, and they're very
Right.
hyper independent, focusing very much on themselves and self isolating rather than reaching for connection.
Yeah, and something I've got a talk on burnout that I sometimes do to businesses, and one of my slides is a cat hiding. So you'll
Mm.
like this, because do you have a cat?
I don't. I have
Oh,
had cats in the past, but I think it's me wanting a cat,
okay.
probably.
Well, um, I mean, basically, if you've ever had a pet, when they're injured or hurt, they'll hide. Um, and the reason they do that is because the weak ones or injured ones of the pack will be picked off potentially by predators,
Yeah.
or left behind by the pack because they're dragging the pack down. And so
Mm.
we have that in us too, that we don't want to be seen as struggling. So we will often hide our pain and our struggles.
Yeah.
Um, and especially if you've grown up feeling unable to show vulnerability because you were punished for it or
Mm.
humiliated for it, that will be exacerbated. So it can be really, really difficult. And maybe something, a piece of work, or, just an invitation, if you're listening to this now, like think about who are the low hanging fruits here that you can lean into. Like make a list of 3 or 4 people that if you're struggling, they could be the person you do just let know. Like what would be a phrase that could let them know? Maybe just tell them this is going to be my phrase when I'm really
Mm.
struggling. If all I can manage is, I don't know, I haven't actually thought about this. Like, what is a good phrase?
A good phrase.
Hug me. That's my husband's. I need a hug. But that only works if they're hugging people.
Yeah, I can't think off the top of my head, but anything could work, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Just
but it's
something that alerts someone that,
I'm
yeah, I
struggling.
need something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I need a bit of time, like just something, yeah. But I think pre-thinking about that, because when you're in your amygdala,
Mm.
like threat response, creative thought doesn't come, and it particularly won't come if it's about reaching out and you're not used to doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you feel you are with reaching out if you need support? Are you good at that, or is that something you struggle with?
I am pretty good actually, but I think I've had to train myself to do it, and to different people. I suppose I know who my safe people are.
Mm.
But definitely there have been periods when, like COVID, when I was like very physically disconnected from people,
Yeah.
and I felt like it was more of a burden. Like, so there are times when it's been harder.
Yeah.
But I am generally someone who, if I've had a bit of a tricky day, I'm more likely over dinner to say, "Oh, my day was tricky because of this." Whereas my husband is much more likely to try and figure it all out on his own before he shares with me. So we've
Mm.
had to try and work like, actually, just let me in because you're in a foul mood anyway, so I may as well know because you're trying to figure it out on your own, and I'm thinking, what have I done?
Yeah.
So we've definitely had conversations like that before.
Mm. Yeah. And that takes a lot of, I think, self-awareness to be able to spot that in the moment when you need to do that. And it's not very easy to do.
No, it's really hard.
Yeah.
Do you reach out?
It depends. It depends. My natural go-to is to not reach
Okay.
out, but it has taken work for me to recognize the right people to ask for help. But I am definitely way better at it now than I would have been growing up. Growing up, it would have been absolutely not, I'm not saying a word. I'll just try and figure it out. Whereas I think now I'm more aware of it happening in the moment, and yeah, just reaching out to people who I deem as safe, or the right people to kind of speak to.
I do think that's important because I have definitely had sessions with people where they've tried and it's not been the right
Mm,
person, and they've not had the right kind of
yeah.
response. And if people aren't used to you reaching out, they might have an idea about you being like, you've got your shit together.
Mm,
And can I swear?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. And so you look like, it surprises people then that to know that you're a vulnerable person who something extra. Like, I think people around you to recognize your needs is a part of the work as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've definitely heard that as well from clients who have tried to share, have tried to be more vulnerable and tried to be more open, and they haven't quite gotten the response that they wanted and needed. And because of that, it almost reaffirms, oh, that's right, I do have to do all of this on my own.
Right. Yeah.
I don't get my needs met when I ask for help, so what's the point?
Mm. Yes. So I think like it's a long-term piece of work. It's the same with boundaries.
It
The first
is.
time you set a boundary, you'll get pushback if you've never set it before. Doesn't
Mm,
mean it's a bad thing to do, but like asking for help, but it just means that you might need to keep doing it and maybe even let people
exactly.
know I'm working on myself here, so I'm going to
Mm,
be letting people know when I need a bit of extra support, which is new for me.
yeah,
Like if you feel able to be open like that, like do it.
yeah. And that is literally something as well that I share with clients, especially ones who struggle with rest and
Mm,
prioritizing other people first, and how that shows up in boundary setting, to just let the people around them know this is what I'm working on right now. So if I say something and it comes out too harsh, or I'm just being inconsistent, I'm trying to figure it out. This is what I'm working on right now. So it also just lets people know to maybe give grace, to maybe be a bit more empathetic, and to just recognize what someone else is going through at the same time, so it doesn't feel like so much pressure of you trying to show up in this
yeah.
different way in your relationship, and people are like, whoa, what is happening? This is completely different to how
Yeah.
we usually operate.
Yeah. The way I describe it is like usually two people have got like steps in a dance, like person A does these steps, person B then knows their steps. And quite often that dance is repeated in a lot of relationships, whether it's with a friend or a
Mm,
partner. So if you change your steps
mm,
because you're asking for help or setting a boundary, the other person's going to have to change their steps, but they'll be thrown for a bit, won't they? So yeah, if you're saying, actually, now I'm going to change my steps to this whenever this kind of happens, then
yeah,
they can kind of go, oh, okay, so I'll marry up with you by doing X, Y, Z.
yeah. It's almost like dancing to two different sets of music.
Yes, that's a good way to carry that metaphor on. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I've changed the CD.
Yeah.
And the other person like still doing a slow waltz and you're like dancing to Eminem or something.
Yeah. So, do you think there's something that people get wrong when they are trying to fix burnout by themselves?
Well, to kind of carry on with the same messaging, I think trying to fix it on their own, I think,
Mm,
rather than because quite often we, like I said, don't think that support will be there and we stop seeing the potential for it to be there as well. So some of the conversations I've had in therapy, for example, are about, okay, well, who are the mental health first aiders? Or, who at the school gate could pick up your kids? Like people stop seeing potential for support
yeah.
because if you can reduce the external stresses a little bit,
Mm,
sometimes we can do that by ourselves, but sometimes actually it's quite hard. So I
mm,
think trying to figure it all out and have all the answers. But the other thing is when guilt shows up because you're changing how you do things and maybe starting to put a few things down to try and care for yourself and make
yeah.
changes, guilt will show up.
Guilt is
And
such a
so it's
huge one.
misunderstanding that the
Mm,
guilt, I should listen to it and behave according to the guilt. So
yeah.
actually the guilt will be and anxiety, actually, these are kind of quite common emotions that will show
Mm,
up because we're doing something different, and we're very socially what's the word, we're socialized to feel guilty, particularly as women, when we don't do things in a certain way. That
yeah.
doesn't mean that that guilt is right and
Mm,
accurate, so you will have to bring it along for the ride to begin with,
mm,
and it gets easier. And I know you talk a lot about this as well, don't you?
yeah. Yeah. It's really sitting with the discomfort of it and getting used to, even though you're experiencing it, it doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you're wrong or that that feeling is wrong. Being able to, I suppose, open up your window of tolerance for sitting with uncomfortable
Mm,
feelings, that is very a big part of the work, and something that it does get better over time, but it is something that you have to practice it to do it.
yeah, absolutely.
There's no shortcut, there's no
Yeah.
magical one that's going to make that feeling go
Yeah.
away. So yeah, I tend to find
And
people are very disappointed to know that there is no magic wand that I have
I
to say,
know the
okay,
guilt just
and
disappears.
poof, it's gone.
It is hard, but I think just hearing this on repeat, like listening to these messages, because we're going against a lot of the like general messaging out there about
Yeah.
helping and bending over backwards. I think messaging about boundaries is building, but it's not fully transferred across to everything.
Mm.
So for example, working in therapy with someone who might have set a boundary around like not dropping everything to go and pick their kids up from the bus stop, for example, when they text, because actually a 10-minute walk, they can walk, they're older now, that transition forward into like teens. You're smiling.
I feel
Like,
like you're
when
getting very personal right now.
um and so when this parent was talking about this with other kind of parents, they're kind of
Mm.
getting slightly raised. It wouldn't take you long, just like you could just hop in the car. They're not getting the same like on brand messages as therapy.
Yeah.
So I think finding yourself a compassionate accountability buddy, that's got a ring to
Mm.
it, who you can, or like a small group of people who are minded to like build on this, and you can then text them and say, oh, I managed to say no, I'm really proud of myself, and they'll get it. They won't go, oh right, that was very selfish of you. All the messaging that you might be getting from other places, they'll get it and celebrate it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that reminds me that friendships and having supportive community does a lot in this work,
Yeah,
and having people who not only just align with your values and what you're doing, but people who see you and value you and champion you sometimes when you don't, or you're not able to do that for yourself.
I like that. Yeah, championing you. Well, that's a tricky word. When you're feeling crap, basically,
Yeah, yeah.
and that you deserve to take that space.
Mm,
And just slowing it down as well. You can sense check with them as well. Like, would you say yes to this? Because I think
mm,
sometimes it's hard to get that internal compass if you've grown up in an environment where you were made to feel guilty. Like, you can't sense check that guilt very easily on your own. So being
mm,
able to say, like, what would you do here? Would you say yes or no? And getting other people to ask questions that would help you think about your context. Like, well, what else have you got on that day? Like, do you normally do that? Like, when people ask those questions, you can broaden out your perspective a little bit.
yeah.
And I think that all helps with decision making. So yeah, slow the decision down, sense check. Have you heard Brené Brown talking about this?
I
Like where
have,
she
yeah,
spins her ring, she's got a ring, a worry ring, and if someone asks us to do something, she spins it 3 times and won't reply until she's
yeah,
done that, so she can kind of think through,
yeah.
will I just be disgruntled if I say yes to this, or do I
Mm,
genuinely feel like I can say yes?
yeah. And I'm not sure if power in the pause, I'm not sure if that's something that she says or where I've picked that up from,
Hmm.
but that is
It's a
definitely
nice one.
something.
Yeah. Power in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
pause.
Power in the pause. So instead of like jumping into rescue mode or fix it, or I can do that,
Hmm.
it's just taking a moment to reflect first,
Yeah.
pause and see how that shows up in your body. Because I think we can switch off those signs of actually, I feel uncomfortable with that, or my body is literally like, oh, I can't possibly do another thing. And then we kind of override that feeling.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, slowing down, I think is probably like a first step to most things, I think, when it
Yeah.
comes to like processing
We
like emotions and
and
feeling.
self-awareness. Yeah.
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 What would you say is like one shift? I know we've just talked about pausing.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you can think of that would help to make that shift, but doesn't feel really
Yeah.
big or overwhelming?
I mean, I always think the nice one for this, for something small, is at the points when you're transitioning in your day from
Mm,
something, to use that the mo at the to use that as the moment to pause and go inwards and see what you need, because
mm,
you'll be in one gear in your nervous system. It might be that you're rushing somewhere for something, and then you arrive, rather than going like straight into the meeting or like into whatever it is, to just take a pause, like, okay, I've arrived, and remind your body you're safe, and see what your body needs.
yeah.
Maybe it needs to just shake off something from the energy of rushing. Or,
Mm,
when we transition out of this podcast, for example, I've been sat still for an hour. I usually get a bit of a build up of tension across my back. So I like to do like one or two stretches
yeah.
before doing something else. Or maybe you're
Mm,
thirsty or hungry. Like busyness tends to keep us very future focused onto the
mm,
next thing, always the next thing. So the transition points of your day are natural moments of gap. And it might feel like there's not a gap because you're so used to crashing from one thing to another, or even
mm,
overlapping things, like,
yeah.
meeting ends, you straight back into another meeting. So, it's not going to harm anyone if you take 1 minute for yourself.
Yeah.
No, honestly, it won't, unless it's a life and death situation. But for most people, we're not always in that emergency mode, but our nervous system feels like it is. So
Mm.
your nervous system saying, quick, move on to the next thing. So
Yeah.
micro pauses when you can check in and see what you need and respond to that just means over the course of the day, by the time you get to the evening, you're, you've paced yourself a little bit and you're not just crashing into bedtime, then tired but wired, unable to kind of wind down your nervous system gears into sleep mode, which is what
Yeah.
I find a lot of people struggle with.
Mm. And have that overthinking at night so that basically you can't switch off.
Yeah.
And your brain is just constantly thinking of all the to-do lists, all the things that you didn't quite get done the day before, what you need to do the next day. Yeah, it really messes up your sleep patterns as well.
Yeah. I don't know if you have show notes, but I do have a handout for a 5-step method for switching off, which we could share with your
Yeah,
audience for
sure.
that. Yeah, it goes into this in more detail, but it's, routine is really important because it starts to tell your body it's going to be time to sleep. But of course, with modern technology, quite often we have the ability just
Mm.
to kind of work anywhere and always. So we do tend to do that.
Yeah.
So there's no kind of demarcation of beginning and end of the day.
Mm.
And so, your body's natural melatonin, like sleepy mode, gets a bit interrupted.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like how you've kind of talked about those little micro moments in the day, because that is something that everyone could, there's always going to be a transition period at some point of doing something. And that's something that I use with when we're having a therapy session, after you've had the session, to not go jumping into a work meeting
Yeah,
or jumping into life again. Like, just give yourself a few minutes to process
yeah,
and get out of that therapy mode before you go back into life again, because it's very easy to just
yeah,
jump straight back in, and it doesn't give like your nervous system enough time to
yeah,
readjust or recalibrate, no matter what you're going
yeah.
through, whether it's therapy, or whether it's like going to go pick up the kids from school or going into a work meeting.
Because I find if I just rush to get the kids from something at work, then they come out of school and usually there's something like, so and so's done this to me, or like they've got their own little gripes, which are important to
Yeah.
them. I find I'm really irritable with that if I
Mm-hmm.
haven't done something, just like even parking my car just a little further away, trying to leave my phone in the car so that I can start to connect to where I am. I just find
Mm.
that means I arrive at the school gate, they can give me all their stuff from the day, and I'm
Yeah.
able to absorb it a little bit more and be like, oh yeah, that was rubbish, rather than I don't care kind of mood. So yeah, I just think what's the energy level? Where are your thoughts at? What are the kind of cognition like that you've needed for the previous task that you were doing?
Mm.
And then reset, because that probably is a different energy level you need and different cognitive capacity that you'll need for the next thing. And you wouldn't go out into the winter like air without stopping putting a coat on. So it's like, what do I need internally to transition to the next thing?
Yeah. Okay, I feel like that's a good place to wrap up.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure, yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
So let us know where can we, I'm going to put some things in the show notes anyway, so I will put a link to like your
Okay.
Instagram or whatever links
Yeah, I hang out
you'd
on
like.
Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook, and yeah,
Yeah.
all the usual
And I
places.
will get that link, the sleep link. What's the guide
So
called?
yeah, it's cool. Well, I talk about the nervous system. I use a metaphor in my book about gears on a car to help
Mm.
people kind of make it really relatable. So it's called the Parks method.
Okay.
It's 5-step method to switching off after work. So yeah, I can send you that. And yeah, if obviously if anyone's listening and thinks they want to go a bit deeper, obviously I know you do therapy, and me and my practice offer therapy too, but just listening and absorbing podcasts like this is a really good first step to getting that self-awareness. So just hats off to anyone who's listened to the end and is gonna like take one little thing and go and do it,
Yeah,
because it does build up, it does make a difference. It might
it
seem
does.
like a little thing, but actually that's how progress is made, through little steps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for today, Claire.
Thanks for having me. It's been really
Okay.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining this episode of Healing Childhood Trauma. I hope you found today's discussion insightful and empowering. Remember, healing is a journey and you are not alone on this path. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. And you can share this episode with a friend. Your feedback helps this podcast to reach more women who are ready to heal and build secure, healthy relationships and heal from the past.